Welcome to The Conversation Continues. We're talking today on the Record with Greg Jefferson, who's the editor-in-chief of the San Antonio Current, Josh Baugh, City Hall reporter for the San Antonio Express News, and Elaine Ayala, who is a senior reporter and columnist for the San Antonio Express News. We talked earlier about the Beto phenomenon. Does that spill over into other Democrats? Does that enliven and strengthen the Texas Democratic Party? Or, as you mentioned, is he a one-off, just simply because of his unique personality? Greg, let me start with you.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I would say he's a one-off. He's built a real coalition here that didn't exist before. New voters, younger, a lot more engaged minority voters. And, I mean, the question is, if he's not on the scene, is there anyone who can lead that coalition? And I don't know. I mean, I think that's an open question. I think he is very charismatic, and I think we in the media followed him very closely. He was kind of he was a really unique candidate, and fun to cover in some ways.
What about comparing him to JFK and Barack Obama? Does he have that blood in him?
I don't know. I mean, I just don't get. You talk to. We had a couple of interviews with Beto O'Rourke during the campaign, and yeah, I mean, he's obviously a serious politician. He's given a lot of thought to the issues. Does he have the gravitas of a JFK or an Obama? I mean, he hasn't really demonstrated that yet, but it's not to say he doesn't.
Elaine, you talked during the TV portion about the young Democrats who are rising up. Is that due to Beto O'Rourke, and do you anticipate seeing more of that new blood coming into the Democratic Party?
I hope so. I don't know if we can credit only Beto O'Rourke for galvanizing millennials, for galvanizing Latinos, African Americans, first-time voters who had just registered, and people who had registered long ago and had never really shown up at midterm. So what we need is, we need Beto to lead a coalition that keeps those voters interested in the next election and the next one and the next one. And I've also noticed how much he galvanized voters outside of the state. That I had a relative call me up and said she wanted to come, and she's in college, and she wanted to come and work for Beto, and I said, you need to finish your term. But I think that, yes, I think if someone and various coalitions get together and harnesses that energy, it could mean an even more purple state next time. And I don't know. What do you think? What do y'all think?
I mean, just a quick anecdote. A friend of mine. So I grew up in Indiana. So a high school friend of mine got a hold of me a few weeks ago to say, hey, have you voted yet? Because she knows I'm in San Antonio. And I'm like, no, early voting hasn't started. And she's like, well, when you do, vote for Beto. And she lives in Denver. And so not only was she lobbying me to vote for O'Rourke, she was also making phone calls for him. Like, she was phone banking from her condo in Denver. And, this is like an Indiana kid. And, I just wonder how many other people around the country outside of Texas were engaged in similar activity.
Josh, what's the way forward from everything that we learned on Tuesday for city government, for county government, for the state in general? Where were we going to be next year, 2 years from now, because of what happened on Tuesday?
I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer that question, but I think that one thing that we ought to talk about is what Beto's loss means for Julian and Joaquin Castro. We haven't talked about that at all, and I think that if Beto had won the Senate race, it takes him off the table. He committed to being senator for 6 years if he won, and during the race he said he wasn't interested in running for anything else, but that's exactly what you have to say when you're running. You can't be speculating about a future race when you're in the middle of one, and so you can't take anything to the bank that any candidate says while he's on the trail. And so now there's this open question. There's recruitment efforts on Twitter and other places to try to get him to run for something else. And his luster is extremely high right now. And you have to kind of question, Julian Castro's got his book out. He's doing a book tour. He's probably going to announce sometime in the next several weeks whether he's going to run for president or not. Joaquin has shown some interest in running for other offices, but now you have this Beto factor that's built into that.
Yeah.
And how does he impact what they do, and are they working together? Are they, I don't know.
I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, if there's a really serious recruiting effort to get him, to get O'Rourke to run for the presidency in 2020, and you can see it in, news coverage this morning. It's already starting. How serious it becomes is who knows. But, I mean, if he were to do that, I think that takes Julian Castro out of the race entirely. I mean, he might as well not waste his time in announcing. I just think he's off the board.
The conversation continues. Thank you all very much for joining us today, and please join us next week for another edition of On the Record.